Hello, you. Yes, you. Let's talk. Hey there. I am really excited to be bringing you this episode today. It's something that I've had lots of requests for. So obviously we have talked extensively about the menstrual cycle, different phases of the cycle, how to live in alignment with your cycle. And along the way, I've had lots of requests to talk about menopause. Now I've just turned 45 and I am not into menopause yet, not really experiencing any symptoms or experience of perimenopause, but it can't be that far away. It's certainly something that I am interested in, and I have done studying around for yoga and for fitness and movement. And so I'm going to be sharing some of that in coming episodes, and also sharing some conversations that I'm having with different people about menopause. So today will be the first of those, and there will be more episodes to come in the next few months. We won't be talking only about menopause over the next few months, but there will be episodes kind of dropped in there. So hopefully something that you are interested in and that you can really learn a lot from, and maybe have a bit of a shift in perspective or the way that you think and feel about menopause, wherever you might be starting from on that front. Before we do get into today's episode, as you can imagine, as I begin each of these episodes with wanting to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and wanting to share something that I am learning about First Nations people, as I knew I was going to be sharing these episodes about menopause, I got interested in, well, what does menopause look like and mean to First Nations people, women and menstruators, other people approaching menopause. So I found some articles that are really comparing the reported experience of Aboriginal women with non-Aboriginal women when it comes to menopause. And it looks like there's a whole lot more that could be done, a whole lot more in terms of study and understanding. But I'll share with you what I have come across so far. So one thing that I found interesting is that the average age of the onset of menopause is 5 years younger in Aboriginal women as compared to non-Aboriginal women. Also, interestingly, the average age of giving birth is also 5 years younger. Not sure if those two are correlated. The articles that I was reading didn't necessarily correlate the two, but interesting. Also found that some Aboriginal women consider the term menopause to be an introduced European word and don't have a strong sense of connection with that word. And as far as these reports showed, which did include various different Aboriginal communities, they hadn't found an Aboriginal word, a word in language that meant menopause or that referred to that. And it seems like fairly commonly through First Nations communities, women particularly, they would refer to menopause as the change or change of life. So yeah, interesting. Symptoms reported seem pretty much the same, but perhaps maybe to do with the fact that the language is not so much there. There seemed to be a fairly high level of attributing the symptoms of menopause to something else, not necessarily making the connection that those symptoms are part of the experience of menopause. And so instead, some people experiencing some of the symptoms and thinking that they might be sick in some way. So maybe it was about diabetes or a heart condition or some other kind of illness. So not necessarily drawing that connection with menopause. So that's what I've learned so far. You might be interested and want to go and learn more. Please do. But for now, I am very excited to be bringing you a conversation that I had with Alexandra Pope. Now, Alexandra Pope is one of the co-founders of Red School, along with Sjanie Hugo Wurlitzer. And the Red School is all about menstruality. This is a term that they've coined. It's menstrual cycle awareness as a spiritual practice. They have a mission to activate the vitality, creativity, and leadership of 1 million people through menstrual cycle awareness and conscious menopause. And that is not a bad mission. So Alexandra, along with Sjanie, are just about to release a new book. They already have a number of books, which are awesome. Go check them out. But this new one is specifically about menopause, and it is called Wise Power: Discover the Liberating Power of Menopause to Awaken Authority, Purpose, and Belonging. I really love Alexandra. I think that she is a really refreshing example and paints a really refreshing picture of menopause, one that I believe is much needed. So I really enjoyed my conversation with her, and I hope that you do too. Alexandra Pope, I am so happy to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel like I need to confess that you're kind of a little bit like my Beyonce. I'm a bit excited to have you.
Oh my God, that is so lovely. I wear that compliment all day.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm just super inspired by your work and by the way that you share and what you share, and by your example, and just really that you are paving the way in just telling this new story of menopause. And so can we just jump straight into that? And can you share with us the old story of menopause and paint a little picture for us of the new story that you're telling?
I'd love to, Annie. I've been thinking about this on my walk down to the river this morning to swim, reflecting on all your questions. And the old story of menopause is, well, it's the current story it's not even that it's the old story, it's the current story of what's the messages that are coming out, with menopause, about menopause, which is that it's seen as some kind of affliction or deficiency, or like a health condition that we suffer from, that we have to be saved from, and that it debilitates us, but it sort of debilitates us ongoingly. It's like now we've got this sort of deficiency we have to cope with for the rest of our lives, as though there's some kind of design flaw in our bodies. And of course, many people experience really debilitating symptoms with menopause. So I'm not diminishing that, but it's not a health condition. It's actually a normal, healthy life transition. And that really begs the question of, well, why is it so insane for some of us? Why are so many of us crashing and burning at menopause, literally burning? And yes, we are changing, but that change is into something else, and it is a very clear marker that you're getting older. And getting older, so it's a clear marker that you're shifting gear in some way, but you're not shifting into decrepitude. You're not shifting into being less effective in the world or less powerful in the world. And now I feel some rage rising in me, because it is the complete opposite. I have never been more productive. I'm 15 years out from menopause now. I've never been more productive, more satisfied, more fulfilled, I've never felt, I feel so effective in the world now. I feel like I have a channel for who I am. And I really feel I am having an effect, I'm here serving something. And I feel much more empowered now than I have ever felt before.
Yeah. Wow, I love that so much. And I think even just hearing you say that and seeing your face as you speak to that, it reminds me, I've heard you speak on your podcast and in other interviews and things, and I'm having the same feeling in me of just like, yes, I love this. It's just an inspiring picture, rather than this kind of doom and gloom and like, oh, it's all downhill from there. The way you talk about it actually makes me feel excited about that's where we're headed. That's where I'm headed at some point.
I want you to feel excited. I want you to feel it's an evolution into something bigger and better for yourself. And you have to take care of yourself. Yes, I'm getting older, and there are certain things that come up around that. I don't have the same energy that I had, but I have another kind of energy in my being that was not available to me before. And I have, it's a different territory. You're occupying a different territory, which opens up huge opportunities, and there are vulnerabilities equally. Before you get to menopause, you have huge capacities and strengths, but you also have you're not going to have the same confidence, for instance, that I have now post menopause. There's swings and roundabouts everywhere. There's the light and the dark on both sides of this story.
Yeah, sure. And you have a book coming out, is it on the 20th of September, I believe?
Yes.
That is very exciting. I have pre-ordered a copy already, and I can't wait. And as I listened to an episode on the Menstruality podcast, where you were talking about the reveal of the title. And it really struck me. Obviously, this title was not just kind of some throwaway line. It sounds like there was a lot went into the selection of every word for this title. And as I read it, I just think it's another example of just this really, really positive spin on menopause. I'm going to read the title out so that people listening know what I'm talking about. So the title is Wise Power: Discover the Liberating Power of Menopause to Awaken Authority, Purpose, and Belonging. It sounds so good. And what really strikes me is just that every word in there, or pretty much every word in there, is just like a really uplifting, exciting kind of promise, or holds this promise within it. The words wise, power, discover, liberating power, awaken, authority, like they're all just really enlivening. And so I wonder for you right now, with all of those words that are obviously meaningful and deliberately selected, is there one that you can feel into at the moment and kind of share why it's special for you?
I'd love to. I'd love to just tell you too that book title was sweated over for months and months with the publisher. We just went backwards and forwards. It was like, no. We'd come up with stuff, they'd come back, no. And it was sort of the 11th hour going, this book's nearly done. We need a title. And then it suddenly landed. In fact, it was Hay House that came up with the first two words, wise power. And it was so bloody obvious. I mean, it's so bloody obvious. Really, no, it's so obvious. And I go, yeah, that's what the book is actually about, It was so clear. It was so funny. And then, of course, the subtitle, then again, we worked on. So, yes, every word is deliberately chosen. And you use this word promise then, and I often speak about the promise of menopause. So these words speak to the promise of menopause, the potential of menopause. Now, for us, I just want to do a preamble before I choose the word that I most particularly love here. I love them all. It's going to be hard. It's like choosing between your children. But I just really want to emphasize that for us to experience the full possibility of menopause, we need to understand the story that we're telling about initiation, about this being a huge initiatory moment. We need to be schooled in the language of initiation. So we need understanding and we need support. You can't undergo a huge initiatory challenge and cope, in inverted commas, with normal life simultaneously, or manage normal life. And in fact, that's what we all have to do, because normal life doesn't stop. We have children, we have work, we have this, we have that, responsibilities, we need to earn an income. So, and menopause demand, for those words to have a life in you, menopause gives you these things, but menopause demands something of you to be able to embody or take responsibility for this power. And for you to meet the challenge or challenges that sort of menopause lays down for you, you've got to have some resources, and we can talk about that later, but I just really want to emphasize that. But my feeling is that, even 5% of what we have described, you're ahead, mate. You're just so ahead. You're so ahead. 10% or even more ahead. And it's going to be a transgenerational thing. Each generation is going to experience more as we change the story. And it's about changing the story of the menstrual cycle itself, because menopause is the final chapter in a journey that began with your very first bleed. There's an integrated process that's unfolding up to menopause. You are prepared for menopause, but because we don't value the menstrual cycle, we're not getting that preparation. So I just really want to name that, because there may be people listening to this who are deep in menopause now going, yeah, I'm not experiencing any of that. It just feels, no, it's not, And I want to say, hang in, trust, respect yourself, and get our book, by the way, because that will really help you. All right, so coming to my favourite word in the title, I think it has to be the last word, Annie, belonging, because I feel everything hinges on this, and this word moves me so much, and I feel if there is a gift of gifts that menopause gives us, it is this sense of belonging. And what I mean by this word belonging is this sense of finding home in yourself. You find home. Menopause brings you home to yourself, and it is a sense of when you start to taste even just a little of that, the moment you start to feel that sense of, oh, yes, this is who I am, and start to let yourself really have that, then you start to feel like you belong here. You belong in this world. And more than that, with that word belonging, packed into that word belonging is meaning. That who you are is needed and necessary. Your life is meaningful. And it's like with belonging, it feels to me, and it's something, these are words you continue to grow into, by the way, postmenopause. It's like menopause rewires you, Annie. It just rewires your whole psyche, soul, spiritual architecture for authority, for purpose in the world, for belonging. And post-menopause, so you're set up for something. You're set up for all those things. And your post-menopause years are about really growing down into that more and more. But you get a basic template in place. You taste all these things. And then post-menopause, it's like you start to relish them more and more and get it more and more and so on. So this belonging piece, I think if I didn't have this, I would feel really cast adrift now. The belonging gives rise to the authority and the purpose, I think. Mm. Yeah, it's just a given. It rises out of that. This meaning comes. And so purpose, what you're about. I just feel so clearly what I'm serving in the world. and but also this authority. And this authority is a huge responsibility. I don't use any of these words lightly, by the way. It's a serious business. And one of the things that menopause does set you up for is taking responsibility, because power you can still abuse, let me tell you. You're not excused abusing power. So you can still go unconscious, you can still do dumb things and be totally unaware of the power and privilege you have and, not use it wisely.
Yeah.
But this responsibility muscle gets strengthened. Yeah. So belonging is my magic word.
I love that. And yeah, some of what you're saying, it reminds me so much of the way I feel about my experience of getting to know my menstrual cycle, where there are lots of things that I feel like I've gained from that, and menstrual headaches calm down, different, all sorts of things like that. But really, when I think, well, what has been the biggest gift of that? It is about feeling more at home in my body and being, that sense of settling into who I am, and then things flow from there. And it just, hearing you describe that, it almost feels like kind of a culmination potentially of
That's the word.
practice.
It's a culmination. Yes. Exactly. It's beautiful to hear you say all that, Annie. And I mean, particularly at menstruation, you get that hit, but the whole of the cycle is coaching you in who you are. And menstruation particularly opens up the portal, to really plugging into yourself. And you can get, all that, those waves of love and so on, the oxytocin wash, and that sense of, I can still remember my experience of menstruation. It was like, oh my God, yes. Sounds like it's an orgasm coming on. I mean, it was ecstatic. This feeling of, I am okay. It was a sense of deep love.
Yeah.
And, here's my wild statement to you. And I believe this to be true. That the grace you experience, you can potentially experience at menstruation every month, is your ongoing experience post-menopause. That's what we're coded for. If we really understood, and if we really had the time and space to honor cyclical life in all its fullness, and in particular honor our menstrual cycles, that experience of menstruation becomes, because menstruation is this expanded moment of consciousness. Your mundane egoic kind of consciousness is pushed aside, and that's unsettling initially. But then as you drop into menstruation, you really start to inhabit that expansion. And that's where all the goodies come that we write about in our first book, Wild Power. And so you're being titrated for menopause, for the opening at menopause, because at menopause it's even more expanded and it's ongoing now. You don't get to shut it down.
Yeah. Wow. Your own experience of menopause, I imagine that has played a part of what has led you to wanting to share about this and to write your book with Sjanie. And is there something that you can share with us of your own experience of menopause, whether the gifts of it or the challenges of it, or maybe some things are one and the same?
Yes. What's interesting is I didn't have the languaging that I have now and that we describe in our book, Wise Power. But what I had was years of cycle awareness. And a real appreciation of the powers of menstruation. And I also was very comfortable with working with, I love the unknown, that void space just before bleeding, and the autumn powers, the premenstrual powers of the cycle. I was always very comfortable with those energies. I was always a bit blown apart by summer. I didn't know what to do with it. But I knew I was home once I was into the autumn of the cycle. And so there was a sort of comfort and ease with what we call the via negativa powers, which come into their own at menopause. But and so I had that going for me. And so I was in some ways an innocent coming into menopause, in that as I said, I didn't have all this languaging that we now teach. But it's so funny this, I never at any point, I never used the word perimenopause, and we don't actually use that word at Red School. We talk about the quickening in your 40s, and we explain why in our book, by the way. We go into a lot of detail on that. But I didn't, in my 40s, I was not thinking about menopause. And I feel we should just stay where you are in your cycle, enjoy who you are, and take care of what's happening. So I had a lot of health problems, and autoimmune stuff, allergies and so on, insomnia. And those, I'd had those since my 30s and early 30s probably, really, but when the fatigue kicked in. So I had developed huge self-care practices. Man, I was really, I was fierce because I wanted to be well, and because I had ambitions in the world, I knew I had some things. I really wanted to be well, so I was very motivated. So I came into menopause with really, probably the healthiest I'd ever been, and with very good healthcare practices in place. So that is just really, really essential coming into menopause. Lara Briden talks about a critical window in your sort of late 40s, really, coming into menopause. That's if you go through menopause at the usual time, in inverted commas. It's what you do in that critical window that sets you up for everything, not just menopause, but your post-menopause life. So the health stuff you're doing is for life. It's not just for menopause. You're setting yourself up for a whole next chapter of your life where your body is different. It has a new kind of constitution, and you need to respond to that accordingly. So I had taken care of that critical window. I was doing all the right things coming in. So I never really thought of myself as in menopause for a long, long time. I mean, I must have been 50 and my cycle was breaking up, but I never went, I'm in menopause, blah, blah. I just followed what my cycle was doing. So I didn't get any hot flushes until actually the end of menopause, when I was quite exhausted because I moved countries. I changed everything in my life. That's what you do at menopause. You change everything. So in terms of health stuff, I followed my body basically. So the real challenge, once I was sort of, I suppose, in menopause was, I would say, that it's that seeing of the shadow of your life and really being faced with the blunt truths. So and at menopause you really initially see everything that's crap in your life. You don't see any of the good stuff you've done. And I felt it was challenging both to really see my shadow side, but also to look at my life and go, well, what have I got to show for it? I'm 50, what have I got to show for it? And of course, it was a question coming from my sort of egoic, worldly self that says you're supposed to be this, this, and this, and have this, this, and this. And I felt rage. I felt a huge anger with life, with the universe, that I had so little to show. And that, is painful. And then to see my own shadow side more and more. But this is the work of menopause. If you're going to take on these powers of menopause, that menopause is going to bestow on you, you've got to do this work. You've got to confront things. And mostly you have to move beyond a kind of victim consciousness. So in a way, I was, in a victim consciousness, it was like this rage was coming from a place of impotency. But the good news is, I also, and this saved the day for me, was I had a feeling of something, a kind of grace at work in me. I'd always had that, a feeling of something meaningful at work. And that was just something I've always had. And it was, in a way, this menstruality work. I knew I was courting something. So even amidst all the shit, there was this line that I could not abandon. I thought, maybe I should just go off and make myself even more respectable as I was a psychotherapist, and I had a very good practice in Sydney. I thought, maybe I should go and do a PhD or a master's in blah, blah, blah. And I seriously followed that route, And then my heart used to just sink, and I thought, oh, Jesus Christ, no way can I, it just felt like it was coming from a head that was trying to fix something. Mm-hmm. And my soul was like, I just couldn't rise to it. I couldn't rise to it. And I actually couldn't rise to being a psychotherapist anymore. I mean, at 48, I got the message. I just had this voice in my head going, you're going to stop being a therapist and you're going to move back to the UK. It was basically instruction. Mm-hmm. Move back to the UK and I had to live. And I thought, oh, yeah. Have you got a plan, universe, for how I'm going to do it then? Because this is my income and, I'm not going to be employed by anybody else. I've no interest in that. Could you? Took me 7 years, and I was coming out of menopause as I landed on the soil of UK.
Wow.
But it was this sense of being held by something. And I will say it is my calling. It was my calling. And it still is it's still with me, this. And that, I would say, that's what the gift of cycle awareness is. You can't maybe name what your calling is. I just knew something meaningful was at work. Every time I bled, I felt the affirmation. And that's what buffered me, Annie, against the rage, the impotency, the sense that I had nothing and all that. Yeah, so that buffered me. But it's this magic word, trust. I had trust, but I also had to make a choice to trust, Annie, as well. It's interesting that. And I would say to anyone listening, if you're not feeling trust, make a choice now to trust this one precious life you've been given, that there is something meaningful at work. Because you see, my life has really blossomed since menopause because my calling took that long. It was two things. One, for me to grow into it and to articulate the fullness of it, but also it was about world timing. It's about timing. It was the time.
And you talk of this transition, this time, this really stepping into, like it feels like that kind of a reckoning almost at the time of menopause.
Yes, that's a good word.
I know you speak of it as an initiation, and ultimately initiation into power. What is this power? You've spoken of, I guess, in your own story, and I'm getting a taste of what that means in your life. But overall, for any of us moving through the initiation of menopause, what is this power that we're being initiated into?
Gosh, that's an interesting question to find an answer to. Because, of course, I inhabit that power all the time. It's very, very real. I suppose it is, at one level, it is, to use that word, empowered. It is to be fueled by something beyond your own will. So it's beyond my own sense of agency, but it fuels my sense of agency. So it obviously, I'm moving into the area of spiritual here. So it is, this power comes about when you come into alignment with yourself more, which is what menopause is doing. And so you become it's like you become a channel in service of something greater than you. So post-menopause, your life is meant for something bigger than just your own, personal whims and so on. But long may your personal whims survive, I'm not dissing them at all. On the contrary. But you are actually being made available for a bigger work, should you choose. You can say, no, thanks. I'm out of here. I don't want any of that stuff. At the same time, you almost can't not do it, I think. But you are being made available for something bigger. And so, I could say calling, use that word calling. And the calling gives you purpose. It gives you a clarity. Yes, this is what I'm doing. But your calling also is a kind of energy that is very compelling, that you can't argue with. So we could call it a power, Annie, coming through, and that compels you into action. However, you have to be awake to this power. It's because it's very strong and very fierce and very compelling. And as I said earlier, you can abuse power. So that thing of responsibility. And the key thing for growing that responsibility muscle is to let go of victimhood. I just say let it go. It just does not work post-menopause. In moments I might feel sorry for myself, but actually you can't indulge it. It just is over, folks. Hear me now. It's over. And menopause helps you to move through that, because initially it is all about, it's all, and you have to move through that. And I had to move through all that, but you have to move through it and beyond it. For this power to be available or fully available.
Yeah.
For you to be able to use this power wisely, so that it may be wise power rather than just a kind of power that's a bit distractive and, not really channeled into anything, serving anything. So, does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does. And actually, as you were speaking, I just glanced down at this piece of paper I have in front of me, which has the title of your book on it. And I read those words again, that to awaken authority, purpose, and belonging. And then once I'd read that, I felt like as you were talking, I was like, oh, there's the authority, there's the belonging, there's the purpose, like that's what, essentially what you're describing.
Yeah, these are all the elements. Yeah, that's well observed. Thank you, Annie. Those are all the elements of, the wise power.
At some point, when you were, I can't remember exactly what you said there, but you referred to the fact that it will kind of happen whether or not you're ready, or something like that. Sorry, I've lost the actual words. But I wanted to ask about that, because when I think about this initiation and an initiation into something, into this wise power, how much of that needs to be intentional for it to really be an initiation into power, or how much of it is just inevitable, that we'll kind of end up there one way or another, and I guess we can make it maybe easier or more conscious or something for ourselves, or not?
It's a good question. And if you're sort of if you're sort of at the mercy of menopause and don't know what's going on and just feel lost and rudderless, and you don't have resources and support, you may end up feeling just battered by menopause and will come out the other end, I would say, almost like a loose cannon. So there is this power in you, but the alignment process that is meant to be happening at menopause requires attention. I would say attention rather than intention. I think it's very important actually to set an intention for yourself as you're approaching menopause, for the kind of menopause you'd like. And, it's kind of good that to not get caught up in the cultural crap, for want of a better word, around menopause, but to set your own line and say, I'm choosing to experience a dignified, supported menopause in which I'm able to meet the challenges that come up and grow through them, or whatever your languaging is, to set. I think that's really a lovely thing to do. We love being intentional. But you need a whole lot more after that. You need attention to yourself and a presence. You've got to be present to menopause to be able to alchemize the provocations of menopause. And for you to be present to that, you need to be resourced. And the resourcing looks like this: time for yourself, time and space, agenda-free time and space for yourself. So all of you looking at your lives right now going, holy shit, how are we going to do this? And so I'm just going to put this 1% idea in. You're going to start doing 1%. We are fierce about this. You can't wait for the moment where it all opens up for you. Do not do that. Claim the 1% now of time and space for yourself. There's magic in that, huge magic, and the 1%'s double in no time. So you have to make a real intentional choice now. I'm worth it, and I need this. So you do your 1%. 1% is something, will give you something. So you need that time, space, and agenda-free time and space, and you've got to lower your standards. We're all total perfectionists, and that's crap now. You can't maintain that. You're good enough, and you'll do just aim at a good enough job, good enough parenting. Just be good enough. Scrape by, because it's all about you now. And it's you that has to make that so, not anybody else. No one else is going to come and say, it's okay, I'm going to create space now. It's you that has to step up and say, this is what I need, this is who I am, this is what I need. The choices must come from you. You've got to be the author of things here. And yes, you're going to need help, but the choice, the initial kind of movement must come from you. I've actually forgotten your original question, but I think I might be answering it.
Yes,
I think there's more to say, and there's more to say.
Sure. I'm just following along with you and right there with you in it. I think I was asking about the how much of it is inevitable or intentional. Yeah.
In a way, if you menopause does the work.
Mm-hmm.
If you meet menopause, menopause, if you've got to trust menopause, basically, and that's a choice on your part. So there has to be that intentionality to turn up. But your intention can't shape menopause. Menopause is working you, and it's your relationship to and trusting what, in a sense, menopause is demanding of you in the moment. And we unpack this all in great detail with great stories in the book. So it's your attention and it's your self-care and trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's so radical. Yeah. You've got to trust yourself now. It's really radical.
Yeah, that's huge. And with the 1%, the rest, the space, the time, carving that out, on a practical level, what can that look like? What does the 1% look
tell you
like?
what it can look like. I can tell you what it can look like. It can look like sitting down for 5 minutes, turning the phone off, turning everything off. No technology, absolutely none. Nothing. Silence. Silence is so radical. And staring out the window. Or if it's warm, you can go outside and touch the earth. Go and stand, lie on the earth. 5 minutes, I am saying. 5 minutes where you just say no to the world, no to everything. It's so radical. You take those 5 minutes and then maybe you nudge it to 10 minutes and you get really, really, really smart with your diary. And you do not go the extra mile for anybody. So we have this lovely word, snudging, that we share in the book. Mm-hmm. Snudging. You're going to practice the art of snudging. It's the best thing ever, snudging. Mm-hmm. Snudging is doing the bare minimum to get by. So, yeah, no one can fault you. You know, you're doing your job. Yeah, you're there, you're doing it. But boy, are you cruising underneath. Well, you know, you are doing the bare minimum. You're over standards now. You're over high standards. You're delivering what they wanted. Yeah. You tick the boxes. And one of the interesting things about menopause is you get this power of now. The power of no comes out of nowhere. You find yourself just no. It's just organically there. You don't have to fight for it. Suddenly you're going no. No, you just want to say no to everything. So you're just going to say no to things. You're not going to put yourself out in the same way. No. So boundariness is actually one of the gifts that menopause is giving you. This no is helping you to assert boundaries. So that's going to help. Snudging, this powerful no that's going to help you get really smart with your diary.
Yeah.
And in those 5 minutes, you're going to do nothing, by the way. Nothing. You're just going to really stare out at space. And maybe just notice your breathing. Just notice, how's my body? I'm a bit weary. I'd like to just step off the world right now. So you're going to do it for 5 minutes. Yeah, people, of course, are afraid that if they stop for 5 minutes, they'll never get up. I tell you, yes, it's a risk. It's very, very dangerous if we stop. It's one of the most dangerous things you'll do. Don't worry. You will get up again. Yeah, of course you will. But you are actually really, in that moment, you're resting. And you will find after 5 minutes, suddenly you feel just a bit more resourced. It's so interesting. I mean, I can do that. I do all this now. I do all this same stuff now. I never stop, I have to stop, for instance, I have to nap after lunch. Even if I only had 5 minutes, I usually have half an hour. 5 minutes, I will lie down. I just lie down and stare into space. Yeah. And now I just lie because it's lovely and warm and sunny here, and I just go and lie in the garden on the earth.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. When I think, though, of that nothing, the nothingness, doing nothing, the stillness, the quiet, when I think about, even when I teach people yoga and meditation, and sometimes people will find, and I have experienced this myself, that sometimes when I create stillness and nothing in my body, sometimes then my mind can run really wild. It's almost like I find sometimes the stillness and the calming of the environment and my body will calm my mind. And then sometimes it goes the other way. It's almost just like in the stillness, it just amplifies all of the critical thinking, all of the stuff, all of the agitation in my mind. And I guess I'm wondering, is that potentially does that happen in what you're describing? And I guess in a way I'm like, is that part of the point, maybe, that you're with that stuff, whatever that stuff might be, rather than sort of getting on and ignoring it?
In a way, it is part of the point. But if it's very charged, um, gentle walking you could do, because that's incredibly soothing for the brain as well as the body. So if you're feeling very charged, you see, the thing is that whizzing mind and sort of energy is actually there anyway, and it's because you've stopped, you're suddenly seeing it. There's one way of looking at it. And so if it feels too much to manage, for instance, for me, coming down from if I've had a lot of momentum in the day, at the end of the day, I just have to come and lie on my yoga mat with my back roller and roll up and down, backwards and forwards, and then roll on my spine upwards and downwards, and sort of slowly lower myself down from that momentum. So I'm using movement. I'm sort of rocking myself. Rocking myself back into stillness. So, if you've got huge momentum in your system, stopping might feel impossible. So, something like that, some simple movement that's soothing, it's really soothing for me. And then I can feel my whole nervous system down regulating, which is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Down regulate our nervous systems and switch on the rest and digest. So we're in flight and fight, and we want to switch on the rest and digest nervous system. So that rocking movement, and just, my back on the back roller, and, and that brings me down. So that is something you can do, but equally, it's up to you, and you must listen to yourself. You will know what's needed. But you need space. So if you do just stop, and then your mind, in a way, sort of takes off with stuff, this is what's been sort of unconscious and has been driving you anyway, and now you're seeing it. One of the things we suggest, actually, we don't mention it in the book, but we're just putting together a free menopause remedies and resources little package for people. And one of the things we've got there is to have 2 journals. And one journal is your rant journal, where you just rant out all the crap that's spinning around. And you could just have your rant journal with you. And the other one is your appreciate journal, because in the darkness, the initial darkness of menopause, in that initial struggle period, actually, you may also have incredibly sort of moments of illumination and kind of knowing and kind of, like possibility come up, and you want to capture those. So, if you suddenly have a liberating thought, an idea, honestly, it'll break through, because you're at your most permeable now. So everything comes in, the good and the bad, good, bad, and ugly. So in your appreciate journal, you just note down those kind of possibilities, but it's also about appreciating yourself, and that's crucial. But yes, so just write it out, just get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. And the thing about just being still without any agenda, not having your mind, listening to some music, even music, just silence. And you just start to notice the condition of your body. And so, yes, you may notice this hyper arousal and maybe some anxiety and panic. Perhaps you can just put your hand on your body and that's what I might do, is just start soothing it. But just sitting and being still, actually that starts to down-regulate in and of itself. If you can get the head connected and noticing your body. But if your head is spinning out with worry, write all the worries down on the piece of paper. And then see if you can come back and just settle for a moment.
Lovely. I've heard it described that the menstruating years being like a training ground for menopause. And I have heard some of my friends, people that I know, who talk about it like it's this extended premenstrual phase. It feels a bit like that, with all the critical mind really active, agitation, ability to really kind of see straight to the heart of things, but some of that being really, really challenging. And when I think about my own experience of that in my premenstrual phase, part of what gets me through that is knowing that it's only going to last a couple of weeks maximum. And I practice myself, and I teach other people also to practice this. I've shared this on this podcast. Within that time, to write it all down, to sit with it, not to discard it and ignore it, but to be with it all, but not to act on it at that time. Wait. And then when you're not right in the thick of it all, then you can start to kind of make some decisions and take some actions. But so I'm thinking, well, if that then correlates to menopause and potentially can be in that space for months and years, how do you manage that? And how, like, is there respite, or is it just a whole lot of journaling for a whole lot of years and then a whole lot to say at the end of it?
Well, the more you're kind of doing your work, in a sense, in your menstruating years, the more you're prepared for menopause. So it's like you're doing your house cleaning before you get to menopause.
Sure.
And then, of course, there is, a revelation that you can never prepare for as well. But the thing is, you've developed muscle. And no, it's not unremitting, but there is a quality of ongoingness about it. But the other important thing about menopause, so I want to say you are prepared for it, and you're inside something that's meaningful. In that preparation, you see, I felt ultimately inside something that was meaningful, that was carrying me through. And in truth, it wasn't stressful. Mm-hmm. Of course, I didn't have children. My time was my own. And I think that makes a huge difference. I had time and space. I mean, of course, I had work and I had all sorts of responsibilities and so on, but I could govern my own time. And I think that was really key. So the more spaciousness you have and the more you can keep your nervous system soothed, the less stressful it is. And also with menopause, you're moving through phases, like you move through phases at menstruation, you're moving through phases. So the initial phase is intense, can be intense, but you're prepared for it. Please hear me on that. Please hear me. So you're inside something, and it's like you know the score, and you've got the wherewithal to meet it if you're, resourced. But you've got the psychological wherewithal to meet it if you've been doing your inner work coming in to menopause. And then it does kind of ease. You really do go into a kind of little bubble, really, after a while, where it's almost like your brain really does shut down in a good way. It's just like you don't want to think about anything or anyone. It's like a little bit like being on autopilot, and you just want to just go slowly and just do the daily stuff you have to do without too much thought. And that's really, you're deep in that winter time, winter. Menopause is a winter phase of a great, it's the end of your cycling years. And then you really come into a winter phase of sort of just deep surrender. But it's that transition into the deep surrender bit that is the intense bit. Mm-hmm. And then really, if the basics of life are ticking over nicely, that's so good, so you can just be with yourself. You don't want to be initiating new projects or stuff. Mm-hmm. You don't want demands. You just don't want demands. So you do, it's okay. You do not worry. Pay attention to what your cycle is teaching you and showing you and revealing to you, and tend to that. Mm. Your cycle has your back, and menopause has your back.
Well, I love that. And I have a question, as someone who has learned to love my menstrual cycle And that wasn't always the case. It was something that I came to in my 30s. I wonder whether at the time of menopause that there'd be any sort of sense of grief of the loss of that cycle, or whether there is just, again, that you're just really prepared for it, really just ready. What's your experience?
Yeah.
What would you say on that?
I would say grief is just very natural, because your cycle becomes like this known, I want to say comfort zone, but of course it may not be for people who are suffering, and you probably can't wait for it to be over, But if you're kind of at ease with it, it's familiar, and you get to love the changing patterns, and especially menstruation, and it's the familiar, and you're going into the unknown. So there is, I think, that initial grief. And this is the bit that I always remember very clearly. I remember a moment where I thought, I'm over the cycle. It's done. Its job is done. I'm done with it. Yeah. It was fine. It was fine. I was ready.
I remember one time, actually, I was leading a yoga teacher training, actually, and we were going around and asking people to share where they're at in their own cycle, or basically where they were at that point. And I remember one woman, when everybody else had been home on day this or day that and talked about that, and then we got to a woman who, she said, I've grown out of cycles. And I really loved the way that she put that, this sort of sense of like having graduated, like I don't need that anymore.
No, you don't. You graduate. I talk of cycling years as like having training wheels on.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically just helping you to get to know yourself, and now you don't need it.
Yeah.
You've figured it out. You know who you are. You know what you're about. It's amazing.
I love
that.
And out of that, my one final question is with that graduation, in your own experience and your own practice, have you then moved to working with the moon cycle, following phases of the moon, which is something that I would like, if I'm speaking to people who've their cycle's irregular or they've lost their cycle for a while, I'd encourage them to follow the moon cycle. And people ask me sometimes, once into menopause, what would you do? And I've kind of said, I imagine you would either move with the moon cycle, or maybe again it's another sense of having kind of moved beyond, and that actually maybe just part of the much bigger cycles of life. What's your take on that?
Both. It is a real feeling. I mean, I do pay attention to the moon, partly because it's very interesting actually just to see echoes of my experience of my menstrual cycle echoed in my experience of the moon cycle. Some parts of the moon I just don't notice at all, but there are very particular moments where I get so familiar. It's like a subtle echo. It's not intense at all. But I feel it. It's very interesting to feel how so I enjoy it. But the truth is, I feel I am in the deep rhythm of who I am, and I am tracking that. I feel as though I'm sort of held within cosmic rhythms. And I'm also held within the sort of creative rhythm of what I'm doing within my work. So there are sort of rhythms within rhythms. So there's sort of multiple levels at which it's working. But the whole point really is that you become deeply responsive to rhythmic life and the need for rhythmic life. So, for instance, in a day, I really honor the rhythm of the day, because it just keeps me so... I know what my rhythm is within this, the day-night rhythm, and my needs, and organizing my life around that. For instance, I just can't do stuff late. I can't go late. I can do things at crack of dawn, but and it's that cooperation with that, and knowing and feeling how my energy changes and so on. So it's the deep care of rhythmic life in all its guises, really. Yeah, from the cosmic to the very kind of real day-to-day stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the sound of that. Again, I'm like, you're doing that thing that makes it just seem there's something so beautiful about the way that you speak of it. You said the words of held by cosmic rhythms, held within cosmic rhythms. I'm like, I want to be held in cosmic rhythms. That sounds amazing.
Well, you are.
Yeah.
You are. And your menstrual cycle is proxy for that. Menstrual cycle is proxy for that. So, your cycle is tuning you up so that, So actually, the cosmic rhythm is right there in the back of your cycle.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. And that's just a reminder, as you've said a couple of times, is to be really where we are. And as much as I say, I love this and I want to be there, like I don't want to rush there. I'm very, very happy here, and I want to be fully present in what this phase of my life that I'm in, and this, the details of right now. But it's just such a refreshing picture. And it goes back to what we said right at the beginning, just the new story of menopause. It's beautifully refreshing and very much needed. So I'm very, very grateful for your time, Alexandra. And is there anything that you'd like to finish with? Any last word that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I think I've said everything I would like to say. I'd only be repeating something, Annie.
Sure.
Yeah, except to say thank you very much. It was a very satisfying conversation with you.
No, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And people can pre-order your book. It's on.
Yes, they can. I cannot. If you go to redschool.net, you'll probably find, yes, you will, you'll see it. But I actually haven't got the exact URL in my head, but I will send it to you and you can put it in the show notes.
I will put it in the show notes, and I have got it. I wrote it down here. So the wisepowerbook.com, I think there you can order it. Right.
Brilliant. So obvious, yes.
That's okay. We've covered it. Wonderful. And also the Menstruality podcast is another place people can connect with you and hear more.
Yes. We're rolling out a whole lot of menopause conversations leading up to and after the launch of the book. And we're also doing around the launch of the book, we're doing this Wise Power sort of retreat thing where I'm just, because our podcast is Sophie, our wonderful Sophie Jane Hardy, our communications person who's interviewing people. But I will be in conversation interviewing one or two people about, actually, I think maybe about 5, 6 or 7 people in this sort of special little retreat thing of really exploring what their experience as the gifts of menopause, the people I'm talking to. So I've got a great lineup of people.
Oh, amazing.
So there'll be that. And then it's just a great big one long menopause fest, actually. On in. After that, in October, we do our Menopause Great Awakener course online. So, if you're reading the book and you really want to go deeper, this is the place to come to, Annie, this course. And when you join, you can join subsequent years for free. And because menopause does happen over time, it's a really good ally, this course, to keep coming back to. And we've got these super exercises that really help you to deepen into each sort of phase of the menopause process. So I'm very proud of that Great Awakening. So I would recommend it too.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you for offering that. I'm sure that so many will benefit from it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Alexandra. We'll finish up.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellie.
I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Alexandra. I'm going to pop some links to connect with her in the show notes for this episode, so head to my website for those, anniecarter.com.au. And I would love to connect with you as well, so please let me know what you thought of this episode. You can get in touch with me either through my website or through Instagram. I'm @_Annie Carter, or I would love you to leave a great review for the podcast if that feels like something that you would like to do. Please share it with your friends. I really appreciate your help in getting the word out. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I will talk to you again soon.